Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today we are going to take a fully spoilery look at Kaiju number 8, chapter 87. Now, be warned. I am going to repeat myself. I am going to say something that I have said before, and I will say again. This chapter is a brilliant example of C.S. Lewis's principle of ignoring originality. The man said, to misquote, "Don't worry about being original, just tell a good story, and originality will come as a consequence of that. But if you set out to be original, you're not going to be original or tell a good story." Now, our boy Matsumoto clearly wants to tell a special story. A story about a middle-aged washout who picks up the pieces of world-ending catastrophes. And that would have been a great story. That would have been an awesome story, and I suppose I am far from the only one of us who is still a little salty about not getting to witness Kafka working his way through the daily life of a kaiju cleaner. But this is the Shonen Jump magazine after all. This is a company that has a brand, a very specific brand. And one of the core elements of that brand, the thing that they sell, is battle arcs. We get our team of heroes together, we put them in a tournament battle arc. As fun as that other concept would be, it's just not consistent with the core Shonen Jump brand. Someone needs to be out there punching somebody else. Preferably a robot and a kaiju, but at least a couple kaiju. So, Shonen Jump has put up some stricter restraints on Matsumoto. We can just assume that. He has to put that tourney arc into the story. The thing is, Matsumoto is a good enough mangaka. He can work with that. He can pull out that Lewis principle and make this the best dang tourney arc ever. So, we the reader are sighing longingly for a story where our boy Kafka has to use his brains to pick apart the fascinating biology of the kaiju of the day. Matsumoto knows this, and he knows that to that core audience, this chapter could very easily be read as a disappointment. Just another stale tourney arc where a fascinating secondary character is winning his battle by a training-powered level up. Seeing that pitfall ahead, Matsumoto goes out of his way to give us 3 gifts to make the chapter go down smoothly, because that is the chapter we got. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, no way around it. I will get into what those gifts are, but first, there will be spoilers. If you don't want any spoilers, go check out the links below the video to go pre-order yourself a copy of Flying Sparks. Trees walk in the forest. Boulders dance on the mountains. Naturally, the ranger was annoyed. 100,000 words of science fiction adventure. Now, the first of Matsumoto's gifts was quite simply the art. From the start, Matsumoto has been an above-average artist. That's what pulled me into the story. That's why I clicked on it. That main picture of Kaiju number 8 kind of crouched over glancing at the camera that's up on the Shonen Jump webpage. Matsumoto, he just pulled out all the art stops for this chapter. We start with a brilliant action shot of Captain Narumi tearing apart the whale kaiju. This picture really illustrates one of Matsumoto's core talents. This is one of his scenes where you get what I call 3 panels for the price of 1. This is something I first noticed way back in chapter 24. Matsumoto has a genius for choosing the poses that he shows in his images. There are certain positions that we all know in which the human body is both highly unstable and very predictable. You don't get into those positions without having made a specific movement first, and there is usually only one logical way to get out of that position. If the artist chooses a pose that is very common and hits these beats, our brains will notice that and fill in the missing panels, giving a brilliant illusion of movement for the lowest possible amount of effort on Matsumoto's part. The thing is, even for an artist of Matsumoto's caliber, those poses are tricky to figure out and difficult to execute. So we would only get one every few chapters because it takes time, which is always precious to a mangaka in this day and age, and it takes effort, and we know that mangaka have traditionally had a habit of working themselves to death. However, for chapters 86 and 87, Matsumoto has given us, I would say that at least a third of the panels for each chapter are done in that that dynamic style, where Matsumoto deliberately chose a pose that would fill our brains with a sense of movement, and then executed them flawlessly. Matsumoto has definitely been overclocking to get the art done for these chapters. The second gift that Matsumoto gives us to make up for the chapter is simply the perfect execution of the storytelling rule that every scene needs to be doing three things. Because there are three major elements of this story and the whole Kaiju number 8 story that have been here for dozens of chapters each, one of which was there from the moment the title was announced. This chapter brings three of the long-running plot threads to not a final conclusion, but a momentary conclusion. First element, an explanation for the exceptional relationship between Captain Narumi and Director General Iso Shinomiya. For the first time we see him, we witness Captain Narumi sassing the leader of the defense force. Now, this is important. If you know anything about Japanese culture, you know that that is a major no-go. Respect for the chain of command in any military organization is hardwired into the structure. In Japan, they cranked that up to 11. Jin's attitude spoke volumes about their relationship. The fact that Jin flat out defied Iso's order to work with Kafka, and Iso didn't blow a fuse, those hints showed us that there was a deep, unusual relationship between these two men, and we have been eagerly awaiting the details on that relationship. So here, when we inevitably have to have a flashback to Jin's training, to the point where it's so inevitable that you would expect it to be trite, instead of a generic flashback, we get the satisfaction of seeing that relationship develop. Now you have the second element of this. Ever since the Director General was captured, the Defense Force has been focusing hard on developing new tactics. It only makes sense that the genius Jin Narumi would come up with something new beyond just a simple power-up. So when he pulls what can only be considered the logical conclusion of his ability out of that suit, it isn't just what so many tourney power-ups are. It is not a deus ex machina. The reason it did not come out of nowhere, that it wasn't a deus ex machina, was that it was perfectly logically set up, to the point that had Jin not had that rabbit to pull out of his hat, we the readers would have demanded why not. Why would the golden brain child, note I do not say the golden behavior child, that's Mina, of the Defense Force not be able to come up with something new when everybody else was? And then we get the third element, the pièce de résistance, the ultimate reveal. The title of this manga is Kaiju number 8, and I did a whole video on the implications of just the title alone. From that title, we know that there are more than one Kaiju, and we know that in the story we will be dealing with an organization that numbers them, which tells you a lot about the organization itself. Thus, the very existence of Kaiju number 8 implies the existence of Kaijus 1 through 7, and we eagerly await each reveal. Now, we have not seen Kaijus numbers 3, 5, and 7, which, by the way, is a whole thing in of itself. The numbers 3, 5, and 7 are considered lucky in Japanese culture. For instance, a family that happens to have a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old on Children's Day are considered super lucky. But we have seen 2, the Director General's weapon, 4, Hikari's weapon, and then Kokoro's, and then 6, Reno's weapon. Now, there is a distinct difference between the first 3 and the second 3. Namely, that 2, 4, and 6 are held by our main characters, while 3, 5, and 7 are not only mentioned in passing, assuming so that they'll be held by background characters, but there's multiple of them. So it makes sense that we haven't seen their respective kaiju. These weapons just aren't as important to the story yet. But for number 1, that is the weapon belonging to Jin, a main character. We have seen him fight. We've learned about his weapons dozens of chapters ago. Why had we not seen the kaiju it came from? The answer was that Matsumoto had made a banger of a kaiju. And he was holding that reveal back for this chapter to make up for the blandness of the chapter. And the reveal is glorious. I mean, look at Kaiju number 1. Look at him. Stop what you're doing if you're only listening to this. Look at the image on the screen. That absolute unit of a beast was tanked out to the max and had powers of precognition. No wonder so many died in its rampage. The artwork, the presentation, Jin casually sitting astride his head like he was controlling number 1 is nothing to him. Glorious. Look at that. So, my wonderful viewers, what do you think? Were these 3 gifts from Matsumoto enough to make up for the fact that this was, after all, just one very specific tourney arc chapter that we have seen 100 times before? Did you feel at all bored with this chapter? I am really curious, so let me know in the comments. I really do like hearing from you guys. Hit that like and subscribe button, and peace out, my wonderful viewers. Deep within the forest, trees walk. On the mountains, boulders dance. In the skies, stars sing. And within, a human heart is breaking. Naturally, the park ranger was tremendously annoyed at all of this. Flying Sparks Volume 1. 100,000 words and another look into the McCarty family as aliens and first contact play across their lives. Available on Indiegogo for pre-order through June, and the crowdfund Indiegogo campaign will be up and running through July of 2023. Dragons! Aliens! Check out the link below the video to go get yourself a pre-order of Flying Sparks Volume 1. If you pre-order before July 1st, you will also get a free copy of Dying Embers, the original book published in 2024.